somebody came to me, handed me like a handful of plastic bags and said, go around the perimeter of the town and find what you can find. I knew what they meant. They're like, you're gonna find pieces of people, body parts, and bag them. I didn't think about what was happening until about 6 hours later. I was adopted at birth. So I didn't know any of my biological family, but all I ever knew growing up was my mom and my dad and 2 older sisters. My dad left when I was 6, and the divorce happened when I was 7. And so I was the baby, and so I was the battleground for the custody battle. So that's really the framework I find my memories of my childhood in. Other than that, I would say it was relatively normal. It was suburban, upper middle class upbringing. More poor when I was living with my mom and more upper class when I was living with my dad. But when I was 17, being raised religious, in a very religious family, I felt this call to the ministry. And so I let go of all of my other plans for college and decided I was going to be a religion major and get a degree in religious studies. And then I met the woman I was going to be married to, the woman I was to marry, my ex-wife now. Married her, dropped out of college with no degree, lots of debt, not a lot of money coming in. So it was after my oldest son was born, and he was maybe a toddler. I decided I was going to go into the military because that's the only thing that I could think of to do. Like, I had to do something. So I was like, well, I'll go the easiest route. I'll go into the Air Force, right? I was sitting on my dad's couch at his house one day, watching TV, and commercial for the Marine Corps, you know, the few, the proud. It's like, I had this like come to Jesus moment with myself. It's like, why do you always take the easy way out? And so I called a Marine recruiter. He's like, yeah, I'll be over there in 30 minutes, and he was. And I remember the conversation I had with him. I was like, I've been working with the Air Force recruiter, I've taken the ASVAB, here's my scores, here's the thing. He's like, but the Air Force recruiter told me that I would have to lose 50 pounds before I could even go to basic training. I just remember him, he just kind of smiled and chuckled to himself, and he's like, that won't be a problem for us. To say it was a shock to go into the Marine Corps, to go to boot camp, in terms of, like, I had no expectations. I had no idea what it was going to be like, what I was going to experience. I remember getting on the bus at the airport thinking I was going to have about a 45-minute, I had no idea where anything was, about a 45-minute drive to wherever it is I was going. And so I leaned my head back. I was tired, and I was going to rest my eyes a little bit, and then, well, within 5 minutes we were there, because I didn't know that MCRD is literally shares a fence line with San Diego Airport. So it was a 5-minute drive away, and those drill instructors came on the bus. Anybody that's been to Marine Corps boot camp knows what happens next. First and last thing out of your mouth is going to be, sir, get the fuck off the bus, go stand on the yellow footprints, look straight ahead, don't speak, don't say anything, don't do anything unless you're told. And then from that point forward, my life was completely different. I was like, this was a terrible mistake. So I called my wife. I was like, this is a terrible mistake, and I want to come home. And what she said was, and I think she said this because she knew it would light a fire under me. She said, my dad said that you wouldn't make it. And I was like, never mind. And then from that point forward, it just started getting better and easier. And I just started tuning out the noise and focusing on what needed to be done. And then 13 weeks later, I graduated. And the funniest thing was these people, these drill instructors that have been 6 inches from my face screaming at me for 13 weeks straight, they walk up and they give you their hand and they're like, "Congratulations, Marine, I knew you could do it." And that was probably the most shocking thing out of everything I experienced in boot camp. My daily life in the Marine Corps was different than what like a grunt would be. I worked out in a squadron. I worked out of a hangar. You know, I went through one enlistment, 6 years, and I extended for a year, so 7 years. I was not really satisfied with my job. So I was one of those people who didn't know he wanted to be infantry until he got into the military. I got out of the Marine Corps in 1999, August-ish time frame, and when we moved back to Oklahoma, and I took a job teaching. Not too long after 9/11 happened, I wanted to kind of explore going back into the military, so I went and I joined the National Guard. I was going to high schools, putting all these 17, 18-year-old kids in the Guard. They kept asking me, "What's it like over there?" Because they knew everybody was going to Iraq. The whole world was going to Iraq. And they're like, "What's it like over there?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I've never been. I'm not going to send another kid to Iraq. I don't know what it's like over there. So I'm going active duty." My first impulse was to go Marine Corps. So the first person I called was a Marine recruiter. But my non-negotiable was I go back in as an infantry. Because this was war. I wanted to fight. The Marine Corps was like, "No, we only have two choices for you. You go back into the job you had before, or you go back into the job you've held as a civilian, which is IT. So we can put you in as an IT guy, or we can bring you back in as a mechanic." And I was like, I don't want either of those things. So I called the Army recruiter up. It was like, "Can I be infantry?" And they're like, "Hell yeah." I was like, well, that's it. I joined the Army as a 11 Bravo infantry. The culture shock that I had from the Marines was going from civilian to military, but not just military, from civilian to Marine. That's a life-shattering transformation, right? It's becoming another person, essentially. Tearing your identity down and rebuilding it from scratch. Going from the Marines to the Army was a culture shock as well, in a different way, because I was used to the way things were in the Marine Corps. I got to the unit in Washington in early spring of 2004, and by August of 2004 we were already deploying to Iraq. So we all got on a plane and we flew to Kuwait, and we staged in Kuwait for a few weeks, and we found out, where we're gonna be, which was Taji, which is a small city just outside of Baghdad. I was infantry. We were in the height of the war. Constant bombings and attacks, constant comm blackouts. It created a lot of stress because you didn't know what was happening. The family back home didn't know what was happening to their soldier in Iraq. We were always getting mortared, like every day, all the time. Just mortars coming in. You get used to it. It just becomes background noise to your life. Mortars dropping in, rockets coming in. You pay attention to it. First couple of times you're running for the bunker. After that, you're just like, it is what it is. It's part of life. The chow hall was the biggest thing. It's this huge tent. And it was the biggest thing in the skyline of the FOB there at Marez. They're always trying to mortar the chow hall, but they had terrible aim. They usually hit this field off to the side of it, a couple of 100 meters away. I worked midnight to 8 at the talk every night, and I'd get off at 8 o'clock and I'd go back to my chew and I'd go to bed. And I would wake up around 11:45 every morning. I'd get my uniform on and I'd go to the chow hall. I'd go through the line and I'd wrap up a plate, take it back to my room, eat some of it, go back to sleep for a couple of hours, get up, go to the gym, get ready to go back. That was my daily routine every day. I got enough work at the talk at 8 o'clock and I was getting up, getting my uniform on, and I walked out and I got about halfway over to the chow hall. And I was like, it's bright out here. It was December. It wasn't super hot, but it's like bright. I couldn't see. I was still tired. I was more tired than normal that day. So I just said, like, you know what? I'm going to skip lunch today. I'll just go at dinner, maybe get a couple of things extra. And just, I'm just going to go back to bed. So I turned around, went right back to my chew, got undressed, laid down in my bunk, and I'd say maybe that was about 11:45, so about 20 minutes later, I heard what sounded like a mortar go off, but it was loud. And I thought, well, that one got close. That was my thought. It woke me up. Like, that was a close one. It wasn't even a full minute after that explosion, I hear people running through outside, screaming, hey, anybody that's CLS, that's Combat Lifesaver, anybody that's CLS qualified needs to get to the chow hall right now. Of course I was, everybody in my unit had to get CLS certified. So I threw my uniform on, and I booked it across the street, because I was literally across the street from the chow hall. Booked it across the street, ran into the chow hall, and just encountered mayhem. There's a big hole in the top of the tent. There were people scrambling for everywhere. There was blood everywhere. And I didn't know. I was like, what the hell do I do? So I was a specialist at that time. I was just looking for leadership, finding an NCO somewhere, and I was trying to get people out. Anybody that was close to me, I'd kind of grab them, pull them out, and then I ran outside. And then by that time, there were strikers just converging on the chow hall, all in this big, just en masse. Everything shut down. Everybody that was there, they set up a perimeter, and they started pulling bodies out. They started pulling people out. They started pulling things out. Somebody came to me, handed me like a handful of plastic bags, and said, go around the perimeter of the chow hall and find what you can find. I knew what they meant. They're like, you're gonna find pieces of people, body parts, and bag them, and we'll tag them. We'll bag them and tag them and try to identify who they belong to. So, in that situation, you just don't think, you just do. You do. So I took the plastic bags. I was walking around. I picked up an ear, picked up a finger. That's all I remember. I know I picked up a lot of stuff, but that was my job. And you're not even thinking in that situation. You're doing what you do. I didn't think about what was happening until about 6 hours later. Once we realized that we lost Sergeant Milo, which was our supply sergeant in the bombing. So that was what I did. Now the thing is like, it really hit me, and that's when I really kind of sunk into the moment, was when I found out, I was thinking about the timing. When I heard the explosion, it was 12:05, because I looked at my watch. Whenever the guys coming screaming for CLS guys to go over and start rendering aid, it was 12:05. And I was thinking about my daily routine. I get up, I get dressed, I go to the chow hall, I go through there were American side and there was an Iraqi side, because we were training Iraqi soldiers at that time. So there was an Iraqi side when they would go and get their food, and they converged, like the lines would go in on each side and they would converge and come out. And right outside that exit is a wrapping station, and I would be standing at that wrapping station at 12:05 every day, wrapping up my food. Now here's what happened. It wasn't a mortar shell, and it wasn't a rocket. It was an Iraqi soldier who was an insurgent who worked for Al-Qaeda, and somebody snuck a suicide vest under the perimeter fence, and he got up one night, went and got it that night before, and they had it made to look like a training vest, like a Kevlar vest, like they wore, like we gave them, but it was strapped with explosives. He was standing on the Iraqi side of the chow line, getting ready to get his food, and he set himself off at 12:05, right there. I probably would have been about 10 to 15 feet away from him, based on where I saw the hole and where the mass of damage was. It was about maybe 10 feet away from that wrapping station where I was at every day for like weeks prior to that. That one day, I just decided, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna go back to bed. And that was the day everything went to shit. So I was part of the second push, the second group that was there. So it was still pretty violent. We had just set up like the green zone in Baghdad. We had just kind of established control maybe months prior to that, and started like thinking about training the Iraqi troops and the Iraqi police and setting up a government there. So it was still in the very early stages of that. We were 25th ID, Stryker Brigade, right? We reflagged to 2nd Stryker Cavalry Regiment when we were in Washington, and we moved en masse from Fort Lewis, Washington to Grafenwehr-Vilseck, Germany, knowing full well that within a year of being there, we were going to be deploying back to Iraq. So President Bush, at the time, he instituted the surge, which was extending beyond a year, usually around 14 or 15 months for a unit to be in country. So we were a part of that. So we went over there knowing we were going to be part of the surge. The biggest thing that changed was that knowing that we were going to be there longer than a year. We're going to be there around 15 months. But it was really, at that point in time, it was more about building a relationship with the Iraqi people and establishing their government and getting out of Dodge eventually. Our convoy took let's call it an EFP, explosively formed projectile. Now, it didn't hit my truck, but it hit the truck in front of us. I remember I was a 50 cal gunner at that time, and I was scanning. And so I scanned and I looked down, because it was all electronic. I scanned the 50 cal and there was a camera attached to it. And I scanned down and I saw this guy on a phone. And I remember turning to my S3 officer, who was the truck commander, and I said, "Hey sir, I see this guy," and no sooner than I said that, then I heard the boom, and the truck in front of us got hit by an EFP, which is basically a big concrete block with a copper plate on front of it, and when it explodes, that copper plate forms into like a fist-sized projectile, and it's going so fast that it goes through an Abrams, it'll go through a Stryker, it'll go through anything. It's nothing. It's like we can't stop it. At that time, you have to understand, historically, we all were there to fight. We were all there to do our part. Looking back, I don't think we did what we wanted to do there. We didn't end up having the impact that we thought we were going to have long term. I would say that everybody that went to Iraq came back with complex PTSD, just from the nature of being there. I don't care if you were a S1 guy sitting in an office. You're sitting in an office where bombs are dropping anywhere, could drop anywhere, you know? Whether you're going outside the wire every day or you're stuck at the FOB every day, I think everybody got PTSD. And rightfully, I mean, like, they had a good claim for it, right? Now, I was going outside the wire every day, mission every day, out in the community, out with these people, and you don't know which one's the good guys or the bad guys. I don't like to talk about my own PTSD experiences or what I felt, but really, more than anything, the way the war impacted me in terms of PTSD or stress or trauma is when it's like hypervigilance. Like when I go to I'm like every other military guy and every other cop for that matter. When they're going out with their family, they have to sit in a restaurant facing the front door so that you know what's happening in your environment. You know who's coming in and who's leaving. I'm very hypersensitive and hypervigilant to changes in my environment, changes in how someone's behaving. I'm not a detail-oriented person. I have ADHD, but I'm super detail-oriented when it comes to my trauma, to my PTSD. When I get into a certain state, I become hyper-focused on details, noticing every little thing. I'm in Georgia, for God's sake. There's not going to be an enemy popping out every corner, but there's been times when you're just like, all right, something's not right here. You got this feeling or whatever. So that's one of the ways that PTSD hits me. And then the weird thing is that the other way PTSD hits me is the complete opposite, because instead of becoming hyper focused on details and hyper vigilant, I get overwhelmed and I shut down. So what it really came down to, like the end of my time in Iraq, and it was like 8 months after we got back to Germany that I ended up getting out of the army. I had one of my platoon sergeant came to me and was like, well, I want to send you to the E6 board, but I need your yes that you're going to re-enlist. Well, before I was going to give him my yes, I needed to talk to my wife about it. A lot had happened in the second deployment, not just in country, but in our relationship and our family dynamic. And so I had a conversation with my wife, and at the end of it, the conclusion was made that it's time to get out. Now, yeah, I probably should have gone for 20. I only had 5 years left. But also, we were going to redeploy back to Germany in November, in November of 2008, and then turn around 10 months later and we're headed to Afghanistan, right? We knew that was coming. So my wife was like, I don't want you going to Afghanistan. I don't want you turning around and leaving right after you get back. So that was a big part of the decision. Now, I've always said this about the military and the Marine Corps specifically, that if you're a person of good character, generally speaking, then the military will make you better. If you're generally a person of bad character, it will make you worse, sometimes much worse. So it's not for everybody, but I have no regrets for the path I took, save that I probably would have gone infantry in the Marine Corps if I'd had the chance to do that, knowing what I know now. But other than that, I had, it sucked. It was awful, but it was also some of the most rewarding moments of my life. I mean, I got to see Baghdad, I got to see Babylon, I got to see Nineveh, I got to see so many things, ancient ruins that are 5,000 years old. That's wildly interesting stuff to me. So, I mean, my time in the military was overall very positive experience, and I wouldn't change any of it for the world. My thoughts on the military in general today are that it's important. I think we need to maybe be a little more discerning in our deployments in going forward, but that's not a decision for me to make. But my, overall, the military was a life-changing experience for me. I'm a massage therapist, believe it or not. Went from warrior to healer, I guess. I'm probably going to go back and get a second master's degree and get a license as a counselor and do that. And also, I'm getting married, so that's the thing I'm really looking forward to. I'm so happy with this with this lady and her daughter, and becoming a family group with that, and moving ahead with some of my goals. I mean, I'm 50, almost 56 years old now, so, and I'm already transitioning into a new marriage, into a new family, into a new career field. So I'm in a place of a second birth, or a third or fourth or fifth birth, however many births I've had. I'm at this place right now where I'm I'm coming into what some people would consider the golden years, or moving in that direction. And I'm starting over yet again, remaking myself again. That's just who I've always been. If you run the course on one thing, you move to another. If you hit a wall, and if you hit a wall, make a left or a right. Doesn't matter which way. Just go in another direction and find your way through. And that's what I've done my whole life. And so I'm excited about where things are going from here, and I can't wait to see what happens.